Now, we've all seen the headlines that talk about Ozempic and similar miracle weight loss shots, but what most people don't realize is this. A major analysis just found out that people who stop taking these weight loss injections gain nearly all their weight back within a year. That's the catch. These drugs only work while you're on them. They're expensive, and the moment you stop, your body fights back. This is why I like BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate, and everyone is obsessed with the weight management results I've seen with it. It helps my body naturally trigger the same hunger-controlling, craving-reducing signals that Ozempic would, but without needles, prescriptions, or the scary side effects. It also promotes fullness, helps reduce hunger hormones, supports fat loss instead of muscle loss, and helps maintain healthy blood sugar levels. For a limited time, you can grab a bag of BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate for 40% off only at trimwithx22.com. Plus, you'll also receive a 60-day satisfaction guarantee and free express shipping on subscriptions. Once again, go to trimwithx22.com to get this deal now, or just click the link in the description. Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Harley Schlanger. Harley is an historian, a national spokesman. He's been covering the financial industry since the 80s. You can follow Harley at the LaRouche Organization. And I am very happy to have Harley back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Harley, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Well, Dave, I'm very happy to be back here with you.
Hey, thanks for being here once again. And I wanted to start out, since you're out in Germany, I wanted to start out with Germany because, you know, people in this country, they've been watching what's been happening out there. They seem like the nuclear reactors being demolished. They are hearing that electricity costs are going up. And it seems like the manufacturing base in Germany, it's not doing well. So what's your take, since you're there, and maybe the people's take, on what's happening out in Germany?
Well, I can give you a fairly complete picture because I've been working on this as part of a program to reverse the idiocy of Germany. It starts with the green policy. And if you've had a chance to see any of the green politicians, including our former foreign minister, who's now the current head of the United Nations, they're completely out of touch with reality. Their idea was that Germany would be self-sufficient based on wind and solar power. They got rid of the cheap oil and gas from Russia, then did nothing when the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up. And then when people complain about high electricity prices, they say blame Putin. But Putin was just providing the energy according to the contracts. He has nothing to do with the prices. Then secondly, you have this line in the German establishment, the military, the NATO establishment, which is that as soon as Putin finishes with Ukraine, he's coming west. Now, if you talk to people in the German military, they don't believe that. You talk to people in the man on the street, they don't believe it, especially in Eastern Germany, which used to be part of the Soviet bloc. And yet that's all you hear on the media. We're next. You'd better get a bomb shelter. Now, then on top of that, the regulations on industry are destroying, along with the high price for electricity, are destroying the industrial sector. Car sales, listen to this, its whole economy is driven by the auto industry. Car sales are down 24% for the first half of this next year. The heavy machinery and construction machinery are down 34%. And then you add to that the fact that the prices are still sky high, and this goes back to the insane COVID policy of the government. And so Germany is in a situation where the current chancellor, who, by the way, comes from BlackRock, Meritz was the head of German BlackRock company. What they're doing is planning a massive military buildup. And they're talking about 800 billion euros next year, €1 trillion the year after that. But meanwhile, bridges are collapsing, the trains aren't running on time, the schools are overcrowded. You can blame immigrants, you can blame Putin, but it's actually a self-inflicted wound by the German establishment.
I heard there was also they're bringing back conscription in Germany.
Well, this is interesting, very interesting, and I actually have the inside story on this.
Okay.
Uh, they're trying to build up the Bundeswehr, the state army. And so they were going to graduation ceremonies in June and July when high school kids get done with school to try to recruit them. And what they found is that the only way they could get them interested at all in talking to the army is by offering them drones and video games. But when they said to the people, well, we need you to save the country from Russia. Oh, no, not me, not me. So they decided to look at the possibility of conscription. Now, I have 3 kids here, and the conscription, of course, in Germany, since this is a woke place, would be men and women. And what happened was the Alternative for Deutschland, supposedly the Nazi war party, stood up and said, we're not going to have mandatory conscription while there's a war going on in Ukraine. And the AfD, as I'm sure you know and some of your listeners know, is not a Nazi party. It's a sovereigntist party. It's a nationalist party. It's against the war. In fact, they want more trade with Russia. They want trade with China. And the German government is trying to get rid of them. So they worked out in their own, and they're now, by the way, 25% of the Bundestag, of the parliament. And so they worked out a compromise that until the war ends, there'll be no mandatory conscription. Now, that could be changed in a moment if the government declares an emergency, which they might, or if there's a false flag, like this talk of the wall of drones coming at Germany from Russia. You know, with all this talk about so many drones, how come no one's found a Russian drone yet?
That's what's amazing. I mean, they keep saying, oh, we have these drones over the airports, and the Netherlands is saying this, Germany's saying this, but why don't they shoot them down? I mean, if the drone is entering your sovereign airspace, why don't they do anything about it?
Well, the problem that I found in Germany is that the German people would rather not bother with these things. They want to be left alone. And they realize now it's not possible. And so they try to find the easiest way to get out of a discussion is to just say, well, can't really do anything about it. And it's going to come back and bite them because this government under Merz, is the worst government Germany's had. It makes people nostalgic for Merkel, and you know how bad she was.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing is a breakdown that's going to be felt economically. And that's what's going to cause a change because the German people are still relatively comfortable, but they're losing that sense of comfort because the economy is contracting and there's still inflation and there's no economic thinkers, no policymakers. There's no Helmut Schmidt around who can figure out how to get industry back on its feet. And so I think the comfortable German bourgeoisie, as they call them, the middle class, is losing that comfort zone. And then you might see something interesting. Now, in contrast to France, they've already lost the comfort zone, and there are violent demonstrations almost every day in the streets of France.
I see that in France, Germany. I mean, France, Macron, his approval rating is down in the dirt. I see it in Germany, Merz, and I also see it in UK with Starmer. And it feels like their economies are falling apart. The people are very angry and upset. And this reminds me of like when World War II started and where everything's falling apart and, you know, they need something to distract from what is happening. And I feel like they're trying to push into World War III. I think, and I see many nations now talking about beefing up their military, you know, adding conscription and doing all these things. So it feels like they're trying to push us into World War III with Ukraine and Russia, maybe using that as a catalyst, maybe.
Well, David, here's the irony. The German military buildup can't work because they don't have the raw materials they need for the kind of metal for weapons. They don't have the electricity to produce the more sophisticated machine tools to build the weapon systems. So what they're really talking about is stealing the Russian sovereign funds that have been frozen
Yes.
and use that to buy weapons from the United States. Now, when you tell the German people that, they say, what do you mean we can't build weapons? We've always been good at producing weapons. Well, look at the actual rate of collapse of the steel industry in Germany. And here's a very interesting fact that, again, is never covered in the media. The AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, is now a 30 to 40% support level in Eastern Germany. Now, that's the old East German communist sector. But the reason there's so much support for the AfD there is that they said, we've already seen what we're getting from the Western governments. We already saw it with Honecker and the East German communists. We're not buying it. So there was a divide in the country. The East was going toward the AfD, which again is against profile. Now we're seeing it shift in the West as well. And why is that? Because the industrial area of the biggest state, North Rhine-Westphalia, that's where the steel is. That's where a lot of the auto sector is. It's collapsing. And so 4 years ago, the AfD got 4 or 5% in Western Germany. In the last regional election, they were up to 16%. And that's the area where you had 7 parliamentary candidates drop dead all of a sudden right before the election.
Yeah. So what happened with that? Do you really think they just dropped dead?
You know, the government here, if you think of the U.S. and the cover-ups in the U.S., it's even worse here because you don't even have the investigative reporters who try to find out. And what happened is that the AfD was told they're not allowed to do their own investigation. Now, the other factor here is that the secret services of the German government are doing everything they can to ban the Alternative for Deutschland from the next national election because they're afraid they might win. And where things stand now, they're ahead of Merz. Merz is at about 21%, the so-called Christian Democrats, and the AfD is close to 30%. That's just going to keep going. That gap's going to keep going. And so the European Union is working with the German secret services to cook up an excuse to outlaw the AfD. And we saw already what happened in Romania when Georgescu won the first round of the elections, then they canceled them. We saw them try to do the same thing in Poland and in the Czech Republic. The eastern part of Europe, from Slovakia, Serbia, even in Poland now, is turning against the European Union. And the EU is desperate. This is part of why they're still trying to fund the war in Ukraine and make this a big issue, because they're losing their base in Eastern Europe. And how much longer will the French put up with this idiot Macron? How much longer will the British tolerate Starmer? And I think I can say from Germany that Merz is pretty much a gone puppy. There's very little support for him.
Yes, we see the right in many countries that they're gaining traction, just like in Bolivia, Argentina, El Salvador, in South America. We also see it out in Europe. And I think the people are ready to have change. But the thing is, are these leaders who are holding on to this power right now, we should call them the installed leaders, are they going to allow this, or are they going to push some type of war? Because if there is change and Macron's out and Starmer's out and Merz is out, what happens to the, Ursula von der Leyen? She's kind of gone after that.
Well, she's a laughingstock at this point.
Yeah.
They call her Ursula von der Lügen, which means the liar. But you look at France. I forgot to mention this. This is important. They're trying to keep Marine Le Pen from being able to run because she would win in a sweep.
Yeah.
If they had elections. Now, what is interesting about France, and probably some of the viewers know this, France has this kind of a wild revolutionary tradition. It doesn't necessarily mean they get it right, but they rebel. And one of the things that's happening is that if you piss off the farmers and the industrial workers at the same time in France, that's when there's trouble. So you have farm groups spraying manure on the homes of elected officials and marching through towns with pitchforks. Uh, and you have Macron has had 3 governments collapse in the last 6 months since the last election. And they say, my associates in France tell me that Macron is about 11% popularity. So something's going to happen in France. Now, in Britain, I think they just are, what they're trying to do is to use the split between the left and the right. An interesting factor there. I'm sure you know who Tommy Robinson is.
Oh yeah.
They're putting out stories which I think are true, that he is very much funded by the Zionist lobby. And so there's a credibility problem there. There's all kinds of psychological warfare. But the biggest problem in Europe is the total information awareness operation that was set up by Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld in the United States after 9/11. In Europe, it's a total censorship regime. And I just was talking to one of my friends in Britain who said that when there were demonstrations last week, there were hundreds of people arrested who were held for 4 or 5 days. And what was their crime? They were speaking out against the government. So we're seeing the worst of all possible circumstances for the establishment. If the people just understood how much power they actually have, and this is also true in the United States,
Yes.
Too many people are waiting for Trump to do something or for Kash Patel, for God's sakes, to do something. The people have to move. The people have to act. And you'll see the politicians squirm like crazy. But that's good. That's what has to happen.
When we talk about like the censorship that's happening out in Europe, I mean, they have the hate speech laws and they like to censor people.
Yeah.
They go to people's homes. They say, oh, no, we don't like what you're, putting out on social media. Of course, we all know that this is to control what people are saying. We saw it here in the U.S. during 2020, during the elections, during COVID. They censored a lot of people here. And I don't know if it's working the way they thought it was going to work, because people always have a way of getting the information out. I mean, if you go back to our founding fathers, they printed their articles under pen names. They used alternate methods of getting the information out. Today, I feel it the same way. People use VPNs. People have the ability to bypass the system.
Ben Franklin set up the initial U.S. Postal Service so that they could sneak letters of correspondence, the corresponding societies, to promote the idea of the revolution. It's very hard to silence people but it's also the case that if you're willing to use the clubs and prisons and assassination, and look at what happened to Charlie Kirk. The obvious point is that something was done to him. We're not going to find out who did it. They're censoring that. There are all kinds of rumors and stories that are an attempt to discredit him, when the reality is that what should be discredited is the fact that there's not an investigation when there are so many anomalies. And this is where when people recognize they're being lied to, at first they get a little uncomfortable, then maybe they get a little mad. It's got to get to the next stage where you're mad enough that you're going to do something. And in the United States, that's what elected Donald Trump again in 2024. Enough people were angry about what happened with Russiagate in his first term, and then the election, the 2020 election, that they wanted to make sure that he did get back in. But as often happens in the United States, you mobilize to do something, and then you succeed, and then you go back to watching football. And that's the mistake that the American people, I think, are making right now. And we just saw the effect of that with the government shutdown and the consequences of that.
That's what happens with a lot of people. And you're right, that people get very, very comfortable. Like, okay, let them handle it. I can go back to my daily, life and things like that. And it never works out. And you always have to continually fight and fight because the fight's not over. And I think some people are getting it now, and I think other people are starting to realize that, wait a minute, we still have the midterms coming up. I think the midterms are very, very important.
Crucial,
Yeah,
absolutely crucial.
yeah,
Look, I can tell you from a report I got from some of the people I work with that there's a panic both in the Republicans and the Democrats. And on the Republican side, the panic is that the Lindsey Graham types, the old Bush crowd, the Rhino crowd, the anti-Trump crowd, uh, they're afraid they can't hold on. Then on the Democratic side, they see that what do they have to offer? They had nothing to offer, and you end up with Mamdani.
yeah.
So the the alternatives to the existing mainstream, there is an alternative in the United States. It's Trump. But for some reason, he's holding back. And Dave, I can tell you a story that I find very interesting. I'm trying to confirm it. I think it's true. You know who Joe Kent is, the aide to Tulsi Gabbard?
Yes.
Well, Kent was the subject of a shouting match among Trump officials because he's saying we must investigate the potential for that there was a foreign influence in the Kirk assassination. And I think that's a very real possibility. I'm not saying Israel. I'm just saying that you've got to look at every possible aspect of it. And they tried to silence it, and he wouldn't be silenced. And you have an interesting grouping around Tulsi Gabbard that are committed to cleaning out the deep state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the president wants to do that. Holding off on that till after the midterms in order to maintain a sense of unanimity isn't going to work. People like it when he fights. And I think now is the time we just saw. I kind of like this, that Nancy Pelosi and Dick Cheney checked out at the same time.
Yeah.
They didn't like what was coming down the pike. And
No.
who knows?
Do you think Nancy Pelosi was forced out?
Well,
But by her party,
said,
but I'm saying by her party.
yeah, I think she's very unhappy that she doesn't have much power. And, the Democrats, what are they going to do? Newsom or Kamala Harris? Their bench is pathetic. Schumer,
I think he's next.
What's happening with?
I think they're going to push him out.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to decide that after what they saw in New York, they're going to think that the rest of the country will be like New York, and they're going to get a rude awakening again.
But when these people leave, I mean, what's going to fill the void? I think they're going to get far left people.
Well, they've got a lot of bad people. You're absolutely right about
yeah,
that.
I mean, look at the guy that's looking to take Nancy's position in San Francisco. He's far left. Let's talk about our health. In recent clinical trial this year, women who took 2.5 grams of collagen peptides daily for 8 weeks saw an average of 25% reduction in eye wrinkle depth, 9% improvement in skin elasticity, and 29% book in skin hydration, proving collagen can visibly strengthen and rejuvenate skin from within. This is why I use today's sponsor, BioTrust Ageless Multi-Collagen, and I'm obsessed with the results it's given my skin. BioTrust Ageless Multi-Collagen helps supercharge my skin health using 5 premium types of collagen needed to help reduce wrinkles. I've noticed smoother skin, more elasticity, more hydration, fewer fine lines, and a youthful glow. Plus, it also helps improve my joint health, bone strength, and connective tissues on top of my skin health. For a limited time, you can grab a bag of BioTrust Ageless Multi-Collagen for 51% off only at healthwithx22.com. Plus, you also receive free VIP live health and fitness coaching for life, a free ebook titled The 14 Foods for Amazing Skin, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, and free express shipping with your order. Once again, go to healthwithx22.com to get this deal now, or just click the link in the description. I mean, much further far left than Nancy, and this is going to be a disaster for them.
Well, the problem with the Democrats is that they can't define what the national interest is. It gives you an opportunity to win. And the Democrats don't have that. They're hedging their bets all over the place. They don't want to say that the economy is not good, but they don't want to say that it's good. They don't have a strategy for it. And if their strategy is to put everyone on welfare, that's not going to win any elections.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they won the shutdown at all. I think the shutdown blew up in their face. And I think what was exposed there is Obamacare. SNAP was exposed. I mean, I don't think people understood that the Democratic parties' programs that they've created, like the Green New scam, where they were creating electric vehicles, it was driven by subsidies. Obamacare is driven by subsidies. Without subsidies, their programs don't work.
And it's driven by the large corporate
Yes.
cartels. Now, I
Right.
think your point on Obamacare is really important. I'm sure you remember from our talks back when Obamacare was being pushed that we said that Obamacare was a Hitler policy. It was a depopulation policy.
Hmm.
It was going to destroy the overall health system in the United States, and it was going to be done under the idea that we're going to give everybody equal care. Well, that's not at all what it was. It was a bailout of the health insurance companies, a bailout of the for-profit hospitals. And that's what's blowing up now. And if you have a bad program like that that needs a large subsidy to function at all, what happens when the government has $38 trillion in debt and can't provide the subsidy any longer? And that's the problem that the United States as a whole faces. That's the problem the world faces. The debt has grown out of control. And what the establishment tries to do is either bail it out with just printing money, as though that won't make a difference, or say, well, we just have to cut everything. And they don't think about what enables you to get out of debt. Two things: bankruptcy reorganization, where you actually take a hard look at where you're losing money and why. And then secondly, a new credit policy, which goes to the productive sectors of the economy, where you can actually create wealth over and above the costs of the debt. That's a simple economic question, but there's no one asking that in the United States.
Well, I also think this also shows the people, especially with Obamacare, that when they say, oh, they're trying to help the little person, they're actually helping the big insurance companies, because all the premiums, the subsidies, they all go to the insurance companies, and they've become very, very wealthy. So
it's a very interesting point, Dave. I'm writing an article right now on who was Jeffrey Epstein really. And I'm looking at Epstein as not as the pervert,
right.
but he certainly was, but he was something more than that. He was part of the transition from investment in physical production into a purely speculative economy. And people ignore the fact that who was it that funded him? He got money from people who were part of the Michael Milken junk bond network, which was organized crime. That's where his money came from. And what did they do? They used that money to create funds outside of the banking system to fund things like the AI and the Silicon Valley surveillance state. And they do it under the guise of saying, well, we want to give the little guy a chance. We want the private sector investing in it. What if the private sector is more corrupt than the government sector? And that's what you have with a lot of this Silicon Valley. You have this transhumanism. You have people who think they have a right to control what people think. And Epstein was not the coordinator of that. He was just someone who was part of that policy. But the media has done such a good job of throwing out all the salacious sexual stories that no one really looks at where did his money come from and what was the intent of giving him money.
I mean, I think J.P. Morgan was also involved because they knew exactly what he was doing, and they didn't shut his account down. They didn't do anything with it, and they knew exactly what was happening.
Wait till you see my article, because it actually starts with Bear Stearns.
Really?
That's where he went from the Dalton School to Bear Stearns, where Bear Stearns had to get rid of him because he was violating the regulatory procedures. And then where does he go? He set up his own company, and he went to this guy, Les Wexner. Now, Wexner is known for Victoria's Secrets, the Limited, and things of that sort. But where did he get his money? He got his money from Jewish organized crime, the Meyer Lansky mob. And that's where a lot of Milken's money came from. And this was an operation that was designed to break the old business relations under the guise of democratizing finance. And how well has that worked? It's put a lot of power in the hands of criminals. And that's what Epstein represented. When Wexner finally broke with him, Wexner gave him $200 million in over 5 years to play around with.
Wow.
And then when he had his first arrest in 2006, 2007, the investigation in the Southern District of Florida was looking into his financial fraud. And Acosta stepped in and shut that down and instead made sure that he went to Club Fed on sexual charges. And then he started all over again. And who was his second sugar daddy? Leon Black, the chief junk bond dealer for Michael Milken. So you have this criminal network funding these operatives who supposedly are democratizing finances. And what that means is they're just bypassing channels that in the past have worked in industry and in entrepreneurship, shut those down. And then when the banking problems of the new guys show up, what do? They bail them out. Epstein was one of the first people to use collateralized debt obligations that built up the 2007-2008 mortgage crisis. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I mean, it's amazing to me. There's all kinds of material finally starting to come out because there are a few people digging who say, yeah, look, the guy's a sex pervert, but so many of these guys are.
Well, I think people are going to be surprised of how many people actually are. And, most of these people play a very good role in hiding it, but eventually it always comes out. That's the way I see it. They always slip up somehow, some way.
The media knows that Americans are obsessed with riches and celebrity, and so they play up that side of it. And people get fascinated that a guy has a jet and owns an island, and they don't ask the question of how did this guy get that? What did he do to get it?
Before the interview, we were talking about Ukraine and Russia, and we're talking about the EU. And we know that Trump, he met with Putin in Alaska. And I said to you that I think they're making, some type of economic deal when the war comes to an end. Who do you think is actually the problem here with Ukraine and Russia? Is it Putin or is it Zelensky and the EU?
Zelensky's a puppet. It's the European Union. And they're promising him they'll keep him in power. They'll let him be corrupt. And this is now starting to backfire. There's a whole series of stories coming out that the guy who's known as Zelensky's wallet just fled the country because he was about to be investigated. The situation in Ukraine is catastrophic. And the Ukrainian people are not being served well by the ego of Zelensky. But the bigger egos are the so-called E3, the European three, Starmer, Macron, and Merz. And their intention is to keep the war going, steal the 200 to 300 billion seized assets from Russia to pay for the war. And then do they actually want to get into a war? I can't imagine that they do. But they don't want to stop this because if they do stop it, they're going to have to answer to their voters as to what are you doing about our collapsed economy. Now, on the Alaska meeting of Putin and Trump, really fascinating stuff coming out from that. Kirill Dmitriev, who is the head of the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund, just came to the United States a week ago. And he brought with him something from the Russian archives on the Kennedy assassination, 300 pages of notes. And he gave some of this to Congresswoman Luna.
Right.
And one of the things that he gave her was a hand-drawn picture, a map of Alaska and Russia, the Bering Strait, the Bering Strait Tunnel. And Dmitriev said, this is what we'd like to build. And Putin and people in Russia are talking about it. And when Trump saw the diagram, he said, this looks pretty good. It's called the JFK Khrushchev Bridge of Peace. And this was one of the reasons the oligarchy that wants the US and Russia to be at war did everything they could to shut down the next summit in Budapest. Because if Putin and Trump sit down unimpeded and discuss what are the prospects after the war ends, what can we do? You have the whole Arctic to develop, and Trump is really anxious to be part of that. You have the openings throughout South Asia, where countries are beginning to emerge, like Malaysia and Indonesia, and they need more than they can get just from China. The Russians are providing oil and gas. You had the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting where Modi from India showed up with Xi Jinping and Putin. So who is it that doesn't want to see that kind of alliance? It's the old City of London, Wall Street establishment, because this goes back to the 19th century, the so-called Great Game, where the British said, if the Germans and the Russians ever get together for a long term, that's the end of the British Empire, because a collaboration based on a land-based integration, which now is the high-speed rail system, is much more efficient than ports and ocean travel. And the British have known this since the 1830s. That's why there was the Crimean War in the 1850s. That's why there was the Great Game in Afghanistan. Who the hell in their right mind fights a war in Afghanistan? Well, it was to keep the Russians out of India. And if you look at this question of geopolitics, what you see is that the City of London is betting everything on keeping Russia and the United States apart. And so what do they have to do that with? They've got some rotten apples inside the State Department, the security services. I personally think one of the really bad people is Marco Rubio. I don't trust him a bit. I think Trump was right to call him Little Marco and make the comments about him in 2016. I think he represents something that's against the America First idea. But he's not alone. I mean, you have quite a few of these guys. Rupert Murdoch is one of those guys. Murdoch has his allegiance to the United Kingdom.
What do you think would happen if Trump makes a deal with Putin, makes an economic deal with Putin? I mean, how would this change the world?
Well, first of all the people around the world who think Trump is an idiot would be forced to rethink and realize that they've been a victim of a psychological warfare operation from the media. I think most world leaders would be very happy if Putin and Trump worked out a major deal, and also if Xi Jinping were part of it. And I think besides the meeting in Alaska between Putin and Trump, Trump's trip to Asia, where he met with the Malaysian prime minister, he met with the South Korean president, and look, the Japanese prime minister. This was really fascinating, Dave. The media here was saying she's a hardliner, she's anti-Russia, anti-China. And what was the first thing she did when she got in office? She said, we've got to finally sign the treaty to end World War II with Russia so we can figure out who's going to get those islands. And then she said, we want to trade with China. And her meeting with Trump went very well. Now, why is that so? Her mentor was the former Prime Minister Abe. You remember what happened to him?
Yep.
He got assassinated.
Yeah.
And she represents a Japanese nationalist interest, which is not a Hirohito fascist, but the idea that Japan wants to be part of the neighborhood of growing nations in Asia. And Japan and Korea, South Korea, both have problems. They have extremely low birth rates because of pessimism in the population. And they look over at China and they see that people are happy in China. People are happy in Russia. I'm not trying to overplay this question of the happiness of the population.
Right.
But they have a sense they're going somewhere, whereas Japan and South Korea don't have that. And so Trump is smart enough to see that. And then you take this thing with Dmitriev coming to the United States with this map and meeting with people in the Congress saying, we want to do business. And then you have people in the Congress who say, well, get out of Ukraine. That's not going to work. The Ukraine war, I think, will come to an end in a relatively short period of time. I'm not saying in the next weeks, but the fall of Petrovsk is coming, the encirclement of Ukrainian troops. Even if they get all the weapons from the European Union, who's going to fire those weapons? There are huge desertions from the Ukrainian army. And in the United States, we're getting a lot of bull from the media as to what the actual circumstance is. I think sometimes he gets a little overheated, but Scott Ritter is very accurate in his assessment that the situation is melting down dramatically. They're looking to try and get rid of Zelensky, but who are they going to put in? Poroshenko? They don't have, maybe they'll put in Tony Blinken.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think we can end the war in Ukraine? I mean, right now, it seems like the players, like you just mentioned, that France and Germany, UK, the EU, they don't want it to end. And it seems like they're going to keep funding it until maybe they have a false flag. I don't know. Just try to start World War III.
Well, the false flag is the biggest danger.
Yeah.
I think what Trump is calculating is that the Europeans don't have the stick-to-itiveness to really carry this out. And that at a certain point, they're going to look at him and say, are you going to help us or not? Are you going to be in this or not? And Trump's going to say, I'm washing my hands of this. We've spent too much money. It was Biden's war. I don't want it. The American people don't want it. And the Europeans are going to be standing there with their pants down around their ankles. And their lack of manhood will be shown to everybody at that point. And I think this is something, it's hard to know how it will happen, but I think the direction of the fighting in Ukraine is overwhelming toward the Russians. The targeting of the Ukrainian infrastructure is taking a huge toll. The tiredness of the Ukrainian people. So I think it's winding down. Now, what's going to end it? I personally think that Trump should be a little bit more proactive and maybe talk to some of the leaders of Europe and just say, look, we'll help you out with the economy. We'll work a trade deal, but you've got to stop funding this war. I think that's the card that he does have to play.
Well, I guess maybe he's waiting for the perfect opportunity and the leverage where they're so exhausted, there's no way that they can win in Ukraine, where he can come in and say, okay, now we got to end this. And maybe he'll be able to convince them.
Well, I think that's probably the best hope.
Yeah.
On the other side, you might have some of these Russian military guys who are saying, no, we want to use the one of our new missiles to take out a plant building weapons. And then you have the risk of World War III.
Yeah.
I think we don't realize how lucky we are that Putin is willing to be patient in this situation. But I think we also have to realize that the Russians' patience is not everlasting.
Well, I think the Russians, I think they've always had the ability to pretty much just wipe out Ukraine if they really wanted to. Going all the way back to 2014, 2015. I mean, they could have just come in and just bombed the whole place and it would have been done, but they didn't.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, which is that they take seriously the commitment to not initiating a major conflict. They waited for, 8 years after the Maidan coup. They waited for the West to do something to rein in the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And not only did the West not rein them in, they supported them.
Yep.
They armed them. They encouraged them to move east against Russia. So the Russians have been very patient, but at the same time, their strategy has been to inflict a toll on the military machine of Ukraine and also of Europe. And what it's exposed is that the weapons that the Europeans had were outdated. They didn't have significant numbers, and they were dependent on the U.S. And look, Trump knows that. I was talking to an analyst who just came back from a trip to Eastern Europe. And I asked him, what are they saying in Hungary?
Hmm.
And he said that they're laughing and they're saying that they're trying to make Orban, the guy who's the bad guy. Orban has been outflanking them repeatedly. And now Orban just was in his meeting with Trump.
Right.
And I think the Budapest summit will be back on. And who knows what will happen? What do you think would happen if Trump came out of the summit with Putin and said, we made a deal, we're going to build a tunnel under the Bering Strait, which the Americans and the Russians have wanted since Seward purchased the Alaska from the Russians during the Civil War.
Well, I think the fake news they'll go crazy. You'll have all the Democrats going crazy. He's working with Putin. I mean, they'll take the opposite side, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean that's just normal.
But their credibility is pretty low right
Yeah, that
now.
is true. That is true. But I think most of the leaders around the world will be like, this is a great thing to have an economic deal and have a system where you can trade across from Russia right to the U.S., come down through the 51st state, which is Canada, right into America.
Well, and you know, the idea of the Bering Strait Tunnel is not just to connect the far western part of Alaska with the far eastern part of Siberia. It's connecting Eurasia with the Americas.
Mm.
And the idea that has been discussed in the past is water projects and transportation projects down the west coast of the United States through South and Central America down to the Puerto de Fuego of the southernmost point of Chile. You could have an integrated uh, economic zone.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't even have to be free trade. It would work because countries want to have more trade. They want to see the rest of the world. I'm really hopeful something like this happens because I think it's the only way at my age I'm going to get to see the parts of the world I haven't seen yet.
Yeah. I for some reason, I think, I don't know what's going to happen next week, but I think it's definitely going to happen. I think for some reason, Trump, he keeps saying he's a peacemaker. He stopped, all these different wars. I think he wants peace. I think he wants economic deals. I think he wants to build the country up. Yes, there's powers that are trying to stop him. There's people that don't want this to move forward. The central bank doesn't like the tariff system. You could see there's a lot of things a lot of organizations, a lot of people that are trying to stop all this. And I think this is what he's been fighting since he got back into office.
Well, our biggest fear is that there's an international assassination bureau that's still out there and that has its sights set on Donald Trump. And I know that there are people in the White House who know that.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I mean,
Well,
look
and
at
the Kirk assassination just made clear to them that this assassination bureau is prepared to do whatever it takes to keep power in the hands of these globalist bankers and cartels.
I mean, sure.
And this is the biggest threat to the nation.
Yes. I mean, go back in time. They assassinated Abraham Lincoln. They took a shot at Andrew Jackson. They got rid of JFK. They took a shot at Ronald Reagan, and they took a shot at Trump already. They tried
Two shots.
Two shots, yeah.
No, and this is also in Europe. They tried to shoot the Prime President of Slovakia, Robert Fico.
Yes.
They're definitely targeting the Alternative for Deutschland. They're targeting the nationalists, the sovereigntists throughout Europe. And I would say one other thing: the sovereigntists have to get a little more clever, and they have to be more aggressive in appealing to the people of their nation. I was invited to a dinner the other night of some leaders of the Alternative for Deutschland, and they're happy to talk to me because they like to get input from the United States. But I told them that their strategy of waiting until things are worse and worse and worse and then coming forward is a bad strategy. That was the strategy the communists had in dealing with Hitler in the 1930s. You're in a position where you're making progress. Put all your cards on the table now and go out to the people and rally them. And I think that's true for the sovereignty movement around the world. And the model for that is what happened in 2016. No one thought Donald Trump would win the election. And he did a completely no holds barred attack on the rhinos and the Democrats, and it worked.
Harley, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. If people want to see your work, where should they go?
They can find me at the LaRouche Organization.com. That's LaRouche organization.com. If people want to see the Epstein article when I finally finish it, or actually also my Charlie Kirk article, what was the strategy of tension around that? You can contact me through my personal email. I always respond to the X22 Report contacts because I find you guys very, very serious and pretty well educated. So you can send it to me at harleysch@gmail.com.
I'll put the links to the website. I don't want to put your email down below because then you'll get a lot of spam. I think people, they have these scrapers that go and get the emails and send you stuff. So I'll just put the email on the video and display it so people can see it. Harley, once again, thank you very much for being on the Spotlight. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dave, for the opportunity.
Thank you.